Now we go over to the Middle East, where Israeli Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir is pushing back after the United Kingdom announced sanctions against him and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. The British government joined countries like Canada, Australia and New Zealand in imposing travel bans and asset freezes, citing the minister's conduct during the Gaza war. Ben-Gvir, unfazed, declared, quote, "We survived the Pharaohs. We will also survive Keir Starmer." He vowed to continue serving Israel without fear. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu will convene his cabinet on Thursday to discuss hostage talks with Hamas amid what Israeli officials call tentative progress. And in a controversial interview, US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, suggested that Muslim countries should offer land to host a future Palestinian state, a comment that's drawing strong global reactions. UN experts now accuse Israel of committing extermination in Gaza, a crime against humanity. In a report released on Tuesday, the UN Commission of Inquiry said Israel targeted civilians sheltering in schools and religious sites as part of what it called a concerted campaign to obliterate Palestinian life. We're now joined by Jayant Krishna, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Jayant, thank you very much for joining us on the program. I first want to talk about these two right-wing Israeli ministers that have had sanctions imposed on them most recently by the United Kingdom. Are these sanctions significant against these two ministers? Are they merely symbolic?
I don't think they're merely symbolic. They have a lot of meaning. Because these two ministers, mind you, the minister Ben is for national security, and the minister Bezalel is the finance minister. They have been inciting violence in Gaza, and they are responsible for utterances which have led to a lot of human rights violations in Gaza and Gaza as well as West Bank. And they've been instrumental in some form or the other in denial of the humanitarian aid reaching the Palestinians. So I think this time it is not just a foreign travel ban which has happened. The ban also extends to freeze their assets. I think so. It's going to be material. Although Israel has laughed it off, these two ministers have laughed it off, that it will have no meaning. But the fact is, I personally feel there'll be some impact of these bans, sanctions against these two ministers. And mind you, it's not just UK, New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Canada. Yeah. They've all joined hands in these sanctions.
Yeah, I want to just ask one short question before we move on. Jayant, this obviously comes, as you've mentioned, amidst Western opposition to Israel. We're seeing now growing opposition from international traditional allies of the Israeli government. What are your thoughts on this growing international outcry against Israel?
So I think, if you look at these sanctions themselves, the countries which have joined hands, most of these countries have typically been aligned with the US policy. But there's clearly these sanctions show a break away from the U.S. line of thought on Israel, because U.S. on one hand has been saying for end of war in Gaza. But at the same time, if you look at recently, U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council resolution demanding permanent ceasefire in Gaza. So I think U.S. takes one foot forward and two backwards, so it's not leading anywhere. So actually, it's what we see today on policy for Israel and Gaza. It's a world divided, and countries which were previously, voicing their concerns in one language, they have broken away from the U.S. and have taken independent stance, and many countries in Europe have supported. Don't forget, a few days back, Spain had hosted representatives from Europe and Arab nations to put pressure on Israel to end the war in Gaza. So I think surely, I think it's good thing is they have taken a stand independent of the U.S. But I hope and wish and pray that it leads to some outcomes somewhere.
Yes, Jayant, now let's move on to these hostage talks. Israel says now it's making tentative progress. Looking in from the outside, it feels like we haven't had much news in regards to negotiations in a good while. But now we have some statement. To what extent is the issue of hostages still central to Israel's military and diplomatic strategy, especially with this international scrutiny growing against the state of Israel? I believe we've had some technical issues there. Giant, unfortunately, we have to move on. For our next story, we stay in the region. In a significant escalation, Yemen's Houthi group has claimed responsibility for launching 2 missile attacks targeting Israel's Ben-Gvir airport near Tel Aviv. According to a statement from Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sarria, one of the missiles was hypersonic and one reportedly struck the airport directly, with their missile defense systems failing to intercept it. The Houthis have also issued a warning, urging all airlines to immediately cease flights to and from Ben-Gvir Airport. Let's listen to Yahya Sarria. Let's take a listen in to the Houthi spokesperson.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت مطار اللد في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخين باليستيين، أحدهما فرط صوتي نوع فلسطين 2 والآخر نوع ذي الفقار، وقد أصاب أحدهما مطار اللد بشكل مباشر، وفشلت المنظومات الاعتراضية في التصدي له، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وأجبرت ملايين الصهاينة المحتلين على الهروب إلى الملاجئ ووقف حركة الملاحة في المطار.
The group said these attacks were in retaliation for recent Israeli missile strikes on Yemen's Hodeidah ports, which are under the Houthis' control. Meanwhile, Israel's defense forces says their air defenses likely intercepted a ballistic missile launched from Yemen over central Israel, though no casualties have been reported. The IDF did not address the claim of the second missile attack. We have some breaking news coming in now. The